So the topic for next week is dealing with difficult adult children, including, if you're dealing with adult children who have mental health issues or drug and alcohol issues. I have quite a few clients in my practice that are dealing with it. It's a very tough situation to deal with. So I've talked about it before, but I've been asked to talk about it again, and I think it's an important topic. So let me start by saying, I got interested in this topic today when one of my clients, actually, who's a social worker, brought me this article that was written by Adam Grant. He wrote an article that was in the New York Times called there's a name for that blog you're feeling. It's called Languishing. As she read the article to me, I thought, I think I can relate to this. So I suspect other people can as well, and decided to do a deeper dive into it and make it one of our topics. So the concept of languishing itself is not a new one, but it seems to be particularly relevant, I would say, particularly relevant during this pandemic, or as we emerge from this pandemic, although we may be on a bit of a pause in the emerging from this pandemic, so maybe even more timely. Languishing, he says, falls between depression and thriving. You don't feel totally hopeless, but you're feeling kind of stagnant and empty and kind of joyless and directionless. You just kind of can't get your mojo up. You can't just get going. In the early months of the pandemic, we were just in survival mode and our psyche was on a very high alert. But as the situation has sort of dragged on, we felt more like we're just sort of muddling through now, and our emotions are getting kind of dulled. Grant calls languishing the neglected middle child of mental health, which can dull your motivation and focus, and it may be the dominant emotion of 2021. So what he means by middle child is, on one end is depression, on the other end is thriving, and in between is this little place called languishing. I'll say some more about that. And I think a lot of us can relate to this. He says, as scientists and physicians are working to treat and cure the physical symptoms of long-haul COVID, because they are seeing more and more that there are long-haul symptoms with COVID, many people, he says, are struggling with the emotional long haul of the pandemic. So it isn't just physical stuff that's going on. There is an emotional long haul that's gone along with the pandemic. And as he says, it hits some of us unprepared. As the intense fear and the grief of last year has faded, here comes languishing. And so I think we're sort of surprised that there's this other place that we could end up, other than just like, we're out of the pandemic, we feel better, we're re-engaging with life. And I say is there's indications that the virus is going to be around for a little while, despite the availability of vaccines. This lingering pandemic is exacerbating these feelings of languishing, these feelings of stagnation. He also warns that the danger of languishing is that we often don't even notice that we're experiencing it. It can be a very slow process that leads to kind of a general and gradual dulling of things that were previously pleasurable, the kind of gradual decline of our energy. So it's kind of a slow process. It's just slowly kind of taking away your enthusiasm for things that used to bring you pleasure. And it's, a sort of a gradual decline in our energy. He said we can become indifferent to our indifference. If you don't notice it and you can't name it, what you're experiencing, you're unlikely to seek help or even recognize that you need help. And that is one of the dangers of languishing, is that it sort of sneaks up on you and you don't even realize that there's this thing you're experiencing, that there's a name for it, and that you really should get some help with it. So what is languishing? Well, according to Grant and many others who have written about it, languishing, as I just said, falls on a continuum between the extremes of depression and flourishing. When you're depressed, you're kind of, he says, in the valley of ill-being. You feel despondent, you're drained, you feel worthless. When you're flourishing, you're at the peak of well-being. You have a strong sense of meaning and mastery and mattering to others. You aren't really experiencing symptoms of mental illness, so you're not experiencing a severe depression, but you aren't functioning at your full capacity either. There also is some research that suggests that if you're languishing now and you don't get some help or try to deal with it, you can be at risk for more long-term anxiety and depression later. According to a study that was done by Corey Keyes of over 3,000 people, they found that the risk of a major depressive episode was more than 2 times more likely among those who were sort of in the languishing category versus those who are just sort of moderately mentally healthy. And the risk of major depressive episode or anxiety was 6 times greater among those who are languishing than those who are flourishing adults. So it can put you at risk for danger down the road as well. So it's important to address it. It's important to think about what you can do about it. Corey Keyes, who conducted this study, wrote, languishing may be conceived of as an emptiness and a stagnation. individuals will describe themselves and life as hollow, empty, a shell, and a void. So it's sort of just an absence of, enthusiasm for life. Now, Young and McCannon, who also wrote about this and cited Keyes, suggest that people who are languishing don't necessarily feel good or bad. They sort of feel nothing. It just seems to them like that life lacks meaning, and they lack a sense of belonging to others. And I think the belonging is such an important part of what keeps us well. And the pandemic, really interfered with that, with the kind of isolation we had to experience. Someone who is languishing may be functioning, but unlike somebody who's depressed, but they're just sort of going through the motions. It doesn't really feel like life is full of the joie de vivre you want it to have. Now, French existentialists used to use the term ennui to depict this state of kind of weariness and dissatisfaction. And Wellington suggests the pandemic has caused an exhaustion that feels like something more than just being tired. She wrote an article, it's referenced in your handout, and you can find the citation. She writes, I don't know about you, but as we inch toward what might finally be the end of the lockdown, I'm just plain pooped. I feel like I'm approaching the end of a marathon, but instead of catching my second wind, I want to lie down in defeat. So she's talking about, we're coming out of this, and yet here I come to the end of the finish. I'm crossing the finish line, and instead of kind of having a second wind, I'm just laying down because I just feel defeated. So, languishing is when you just feel like you just don't have any energy left. And she's talking about particularly this notion of fatigue. She writes, her descriptions of sort of this mental or emotional and social fatigue really kind of parallel these concepts of languishing. Jones suggests that the one silver lining to this pause in our life that was caused by the pandemic was that it might involve taking a fresh look at what really matters to you. When you have to pause your life, in some ways it does give you an opportunity to stop and think about what really matters. In fact, she wrote, when the daily grind is interrupted, we can reflect on whether that pre-pandemic attitude of hustling to get work done, to fill every minute, to always be advancing is actually what we want. Moving toward thriving requires a willingness to ask yourself, what really matters to me? And how can I add more of that to my life? So that's the one silver lining of the pandemic, is that it sort of gave you a chance to slow down a little bit, although I know quite a few people that stayed very, very busy, but it did sort of force some thoughts about what really matters in your life and what gives your life value. And I'm gonna have you do a little questionnaire that kind of looks at dimensions of thriving, may give you some clarity on what are some of the areas of your life where you're not putting as much energy and attention that really might be more fulfilling to you and give you a more balanced life. So the one gift of the pandemic might be that we're going to stop and think about what really matters. And in terms of moving toward thriving, you really do need to know what matters to you, what does excite you, what's important to you, because thriving is about really adding those to your life and moving toward them in ways that make them really happen. So what exactly is thriving? Well, Brown and colleagues, they did a comprehensive literature search to look at all the ways in which thriving has been defined. They offer the following definition. Thriving appears to come down to an individual experiencing a sense of development, of getting better at something and succeeding at mastering something. In simplest terms, what underpins it is a feeling of good about life and about yourself and being good at something. So thriving should involve feeling like you're really living life fully, you're doing things that are interesting to you, you feel good about yourself, feel good about other people, you feel good about your life, and you feel good about that you're good at doing certain things. And I always have to remind people, we're all not going to be good at everything. It's just not realistic to think that, because not everything appeals to you. So it's not important that you be good at everything. There are some people that are put a jack of all trades, and that's kind of their unique personality, is that they're good at a lot of different things. But for the vast majority of us, there's select areas that are of interest to us, and those tend to be the things that we're good at. I don't feel badly that I don't know how to fix a car. I do feel badly when I have to take it to the garage, and I don't know whether they're going to rip me off or not, but it's just not something that's interesting to me. For other people, they can't get enough of it. So it's such a personal thing, what matters to you. And thriving is really about focusing on what matters to you and getting a sense of mastery over it. There are certain individual characteristics that kind of contribute to thriving, and even if they're not part of your personality, they are things that you can develop, and they are things that are helpful in terms of really learning to thrive in life. There's things like optimism. Now, I say you have to have realistic optimism. It's sort of like, I don't believe you can only embrace good feelings and be this upbeat, positive person all the time, because I think more importantly than anything else, you have to be authentic. and we have good days and bad days, and we have good time during our days and bad time during our days. So may not be optimistic all the time, but some degree of optimism and hopefulness about the future is helpful in terms of thriving. Someone who can motivate yourself, somebody who's proactive. It's helpful to be proactive, meaning instead of just feeling stuck, you'll get up and do something. Even if you do anything around something that's bothering you, you'll almost always feel better. So being proactive. Liking to learn, the enjoyment of learning is something that really facilitates thriving, because keeping your mind fresh and learning new things is part of what keeps you thriving. So, you have to enjoy learning things. It doesn't mean that you have to enjoy learning things like, by going to a college or reading a book. I mean, there's all kinds of ways of learning, and everybody has their own preferred modality, and one isn't superior to the other. What's superior is the one that is most interesting to you. The other things that are helpful is developing a sense of flexibility and adaptability, the ability to kind of roll with the punches. Somebody who's more spiritual or more religious, maybe more, according to the research, more prone to being thriving, but certainly that can be spiritual. It doesn't have to be traditional religion, but maybe it's sort of a positive look toward life or a sense of a bigger picture. Social competence, being able to interact with people, really helps with thriving, and self-esteem. And what I say to people sometimes, you don't have to start with self-esteem, but if you sort of act as if you have self-esteem and you push yourself to reach a goal, then self-esteem will follow. If we always had to wait until we were in the best possible mindset, most of us would never start. So sometimes there's an expression, I think it comes from AA, called fake it till you make it. It really is okay to just sort of say, I don't always feel that positive about myself, but I'm going to do the best I can, I'm going to fake it until I'm going to act as if I'm comfortable. Now I have somebody in the background making pesto. I think I'm going to have to ask her. Suze, it's a little loud. Okay. I love pesto, so I don't really want to stop her, but and I know she's making it for somebody else. Maybe that's why I did stop her. Okay, sorry, just kidding. Ariana Huffington wrote a book called Thrive, and she suggests thriving involves well-being in multiple areas: the physical, the emotional, the social, and the psychological. It involves wisdom, an appreciation of wonder, and being able to find purpose and bring purpose and compassion into your life. I always say, when all else fails, focus on compassion. What's the most compassionate thing you can do for yourself and someone else today? And that in and of itself will bring you into a greater engagement with life. Another term that's used to describe the state one wants to move toward to get out of languishing is the concept of flourishing. It's very similar to thriving. Fortunately, it turns out there are new ways to learn how to flourish and thrive. This is something you can learn, and I'm quoting, "The good news is that scientific evidence related to flourishing is robust, and numerous studies show simple activities can lead to marked improvement in overall well-being." You've heard me before give a talk on making small changes, taking tiny steps a little bit at a time as a way to move towards your goals, and how that's much more likely to lead to success, because a small success builds self-esteem. A small success fosters a belief in your ability to be successful, and then you can take a bigger step. So even as I'm talking about these things, I want you to keep in mind, you don't have to be taking gigantic steps to start moving toward thriving. You can start small, and in fact, Grant even says in his article that, because the pandemic has so messed with our ability to concentrate, that it probably is good to start with something that's doable. And you'll hear that in order to get into a state of something called flow, and I'm going to get into that, you want a challenge that is just enough of a stretch, just enough that it requires you to step up a little bit, but it isn't so hard you can't do it. So keep that in mind as we're talking about how to go from languishing to thriving. This doesn't have to be earth-shattering changes that you make today. They can be small steps, and those small steps will build you in the right direction. So how do we go from languishing to thriving? Well, let me see. I want to make sure you do that questionnaire. Where did I put that? Don't mind me. I'm just making sure I put it somewhere.
Do you want me to show that, Judy?
Yeah. Let me see if I'm at the point where I want to stop and do that.
Okay.
I'm going to say a few more things, and then I'm going to have you do the questionnaire. I just was checking my placement. So let me just say a few things. Then I want you to do some self-reflection. This is why I like to be more in person, because I think it's helpful for you to be able to interact and to take some time to look and think of things. So we're going to try to do that today using Zoom. So let me just say a few things about how to get from languishing to thriving. The first step is just in addressing any problem is being able to recognize it. the best strategy for dealing with your feelings is always being able to name those feelings. So just being able to understand that you are experiencing something called languishing and that you're not alone is a big first step in the right direction. Early in the pandemic, a lot of us therapists, psychologists were saying that, we're going through a period of really heightened grief. Many people actually lost people, but even those who didn't have a direct loss from, say, COVID, we're still experiencing a grief because we had lost our sense of normal. We had lost our ability to connect with other people in the ways that we had in the past. So, we talked about the pandemic initially as an experience of profound grief, even if it's just a grief from the loss of normal and easy connections with other people. And grief is kind of an emotion we're familiar with. Most of us have experienced some kind of grief. Most of us developed some kind of strategies for getting through it. Not that you can leapfrog over it. It is just a very painful process. But grief is familiar to us. Languishing is a somewhat less familiar concept. In fact, I had never really heard it talked about in this way. I don't know if I missed that psychology class or something, but I wasn't familiar with this concept of languishing. But knowing what it is very helpful. And in fact, Grant says, but knowing what it is can help defog our vision, giving us a clear window into what has been a blurry experience. It could remind us that we aren't alone. Languishing is common and it is shared. So that's one of the important first steps, is to realize you really are experiencing something very real and you're not the only one. And, life feels kind of blurry right now. He's right, and a little sort of dulled out. And so this helps at least start sharpening the focus, making you realize that you really are experiencing something and that it's a normal human reaction. And he says it's not just an individual thing. We really are going through this socially. He suggests that being able to even talk candidly about people, for example, saying to people, I'm not really feeling that great. In fact, I think I'm kind of languishing. And they probably won't say, what the hell is languishing? And you can say, well, as a matter of fact, I can tell you what languishing is. But he says being able to say that to people, being able to acknowledge that you're feeling languishing, and this is his quote, would be a refreshing foil for toxic positivity, that quintessentially American pressure to be upbeat at all times. I love that quote because I do think there's a pressure in this culture to always be happy and joyful and upbeat. And he says, being able to really acknowledge that you're not feeling that way is an important first step in terms of your own well-being. But that kind of candor can really allow for more authentic and meaningful conversations with other people and connections with other people who are often feeling the same way. So somehow the toxic positivity is that sort of pressure we feel to always put on a happy face. My experience is that, you'll connect better and more meaningfully with people if you're sort of more candid about what you're going through. Now, there are some people that are just chronically miserable and, they're sort of stuck in that place. But I'm not talking about that person. I'm talking about those of us who really do our best to kind of get through life and have a more optimistic attitude. But you have to be real about what you're going through. And just being able to talk to other people about what you're going through candidly, opens the door to greater communication. So many of my clients, they come in and they talk about, people go into therapy to talk about things that they often feel ashamed of. It might be, I can't stand how much I really wish everybody loved me. I can't stand that I hate that I'm not perfect. I mean, everything that people come in and talk to me about that they feel ashamed of, I've probably heard it 5 other times that day already. They're quintessentially human experiences. And what I find is if they can tell other people what they're really feeling, the person sitting across them is going to go, oh my God, me too. So it's sort of that idea that being able to name this languishing thing that we're going through allows for more authentic kind of communication with other people. It's about being real. You have to be real with yourself and you have to be real with others. And that internal authenticity and knowing what you're really feeling is so key to really finding your happiness. Because if there's feelings in there that need to be tended to, they need to be tended to, and being able to talk about them is important. So Hayden is somebody else who wrote about languishing and thriving. And I think he had some very important points. He says it's important to recognize that nobody is constantly flourishing. There are natural ups and downs in life. In fact, I read an article about how flow could become addicting. Flow is an emotion we'll talk about where you're sort of fully engaged in something. You can't be fully engaged with something. You can't be in flow every hour of every day. You can't be thriving every minute of every day. So it's important to recognize that there's ups and downs in life. And, you're not always going to be in a state of full thriving or fully in flow. And let yourself be human. That's how it really works. He also points out that periods of adversity can often lead to kind of creative and transformational changes in our lives. He cites Steve Jobs, who was laid off by Apple, the company that he founded. And he says, while he probably languished for a little while, soon after he came up with new ideas and new ventures. And he said it was really the best thing that could have ever happened to him, as it did lead to new pursuits and new successes. So Hayden says to languish is human, as is deciding to look for and take advantage of the opportunities that inevitably result from change. Because opportunities always follow, he writes, and when you work to seize them, the fulfillment and sense of purpose that comes from pursuing something meaningful will help you emerge from a languishing zone, a bit smarter and a bit more skilled. So it's okay to languish, and it's also true that even in the face of adversity, sometimes our greatest opportunities present themselves, and it could be small, it doesn't have to be Academy Award winning transformation. I look back on my life and I think about the things that most positively transformed me. There were often things that were very difficult and very painful, from losses to, just difficulties I encountered along the way. And I think most of us, when you get to be this age, you begin to realize that, sometimes the worst things that happen to you launch you into the best places. So, we're coming out of a pandemic. There are opportunities coming out of that. To still thrive and find things that are meaningful to you. He also suggests that you need to forgive yourself for languishing, and I think that's always important. I think we're a little too hard on ourselves sometimes, and in an effort to do best for yourself, it's important not to beat yourself up for the fact that you may have been stuck for a little while. So forgive yourself for languishing. Most of us have been doing it. It's a common reaction to coming out of something that's been particularly difficult. And I personally believe, you've probably heard me say it many times, people change better from a place of self-love and self-acceptance and self-compassion than they ever do from a place of self-hatred. You can beat yourself into submission. You can make yourself diet. You can make yourself do all kinds of things from a place of self-hatred, but those changes don't last. Always better to start from a place of self-compassion. This has been a difficult thing that we have gone through, this pandemic. Can you imagine 20 years ago, somebody says, oh, there's going to be this kind of flu-like thing that comes around and it kills over 500,000 people and still climbing. And you will have to stay in your homes. And whenever you go out, you'll have to be wearing a mask. I can't imagine 20 years somebody saying that to me. And I would have thought, you're crazy. So we were thrown into something we had no preparation for. And we also have no preparation for this, trying to re-engage with life. So don't beat yourself up. Start from a place of self-compassion. Now, you can also start by doing an assessment, and that's where I'm going to have you stop and take this questionnaire, sort of determine where you are flourishing and where you aren't. This was a questionnaire developed by Vanderweel, and it was developed, I think they're using it at Harvard as part of what they call their Human Flourishing Project. And I think it's about a 10 question. Let me see, I don't have it in front of me. I think it's about 10 questions. And I'm going to ask Sandra to post it. If you have the handout and you printed it out, it's the last 2 pages of your handout. And it's 12 questions. And it really just asks you to rate yourself in a variety of different areas like happiness, life satisfaction, physical, mental health. And I'm going to give you a few minutes to take that questionnaire. And then we'll come back and talk about it a little bit. Okay, good. Sandra's got it up on the screen. So
Yeah, I believe it's there. So
yeah, I see
you
it.
can
You
see
good.
it.
Yeah, and so just write down your score. Obviously, you can't circle the computer screen, and usually the 0 means you're not satisfied or you're extremely unhappy, and the higher score is that you're doing well in those areas. So I'll just give you a couple of minutes to do that. So sorry. So I'll give you another couple of minutes, and then I want to see if anybody's willing to share what they've learned. Just give you another minute or two. Just putting down how they can get the handout if they don't have it.
Yeah, I think Terrence put that in the
Oh,
chat.
did he? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, it's right at the top there.
Yep.
Never mind.
Yeah. I think
All right, so I'm gonna back it off and let's go see what people have to say about. Do you want to explain to them how they can share a question or share? The one thing I want to tell you about the questionnaire is that there's no like scoring for it that I could find, and so what I did find out is that it's really what did it say? First of all, it's used by Harvard in their Human Flourishing program. It was developed by this guy, James Van Der Weel, and he uses it to gauge people's overall happiness and well-being. And while he says there's no specific score to determine if someone is definitely flourishing, the higher the score, the better. So what you're really going to want to do is just add up, all the numbers that you circled and see where you land in terms of how high. So I think there's 12 questions. You could score as high as 10. So what the top score is going to be 120 unless I'm really bad at math. And he said, just taking the quiz and reflecting on the questions can put you on a path to making positive changes because it might identify for you some of the areas where you feel like you're really not flourishing. You can compare yourself to the national average. The national average is about a 70 before the pandemic, and it's about a 65. At least it was a 65 in June of 2020. So that's, I wonder if it's even worse now. But anyhow, the national average is around a 70. So I'm curious if anybody found anything meaningful from that. Anybody want to share? Well, can we turn people's mics
yes.
back on?
May I say something?
Sure. Michelle.
I haven't done from 8 to 12. I mean, you really went quite fast.
Oh, see, I'm sorry. It's hard for me to know because I'm looking at it and imagining circling them, but I've seen the questions many times. So you don't have to finish it today. I mean, you don't have to finish right this minute, but does anything jump out as maybe there's an area you want to strengthen?
Oh, no, I'm perfect.
Okay. Well,
I'm glad you got the joke.
Yeah. Yeah. I'm sure we all scored 120, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. You can type a response or you can speak up if you want to. I think, Sandra can unmute people if you want to be unmuted, I think.
Yeah, I think folks have to unmute themselves at this point.
Oh,
right?
how do they unmute themselves?
Yeah, so if you find the little microphone on whatever device you're on,
yeah.
and then just click on it.
Was anybody surprised by their answers? Yeah, Gloria. Yeah. You willing to say how? You have to unmute yourself. You can't unmute her, Sandra. They're in control.
There
There you are. Okay,
there you
are.
are.
Hear you, Gloria.
There I am. Well, I scored overall 92 if my math is good. But I was disappointed with some of my answers because the reason that I wanted to attend this particular talk was because I identified strongly with languishing. And now that I understand the meaning of it, I definitely do.
Yeah, yeah.
That's exactly where I am. One day I can recognize and almost say to myself, I'm depressed. And then a couple of hours later, or maybe the next day I'm feeling okay,
Mm-hmm.
but I'm not feeling overjoyed.
Yeah, yeah. You're not as fully engaged in life as you want to be. You're not enjoying
No,
life as much as
not
you
at
want to
all.
be. Yeah.
Not
Yeah.
at all.
Yeah.
Not at all. I don't have the handout, so I can't identify, but I can tell you that the first question I answered a number 4. So whatever the first question is.
Yeah, that is generally how satisfied are you with life these days.
Yeah, and I put number 4.
Yeah. Do you think that's a change since the pandemic, Gloria?
I'm sorry?
You think that's changed since the pandemic? Do you think you would have been a 4?
Absolutely. It's
Yeah.
all.
I know you, so I know that that's not you. Yeah.
Absolutely all related.
Yeah.
And I don't like this yo-yo that's going on with the variant, because
Yeah.
1 minute feeling somewhat safe because I was totally fully vaccinated. And then
Yeah.
all of a sudden I'm going in the opposite direction and
Yeah.
having to tighten up the reins again.
Yeah.
The fact that I want to do some traveling is pushed back further. And I feel that. So it's just a lot of things are cropping up in my head, even dreams that I had 2 days ago, that I woke up and I said, gee, I need to talk to somebody. I mean, I have things cropping up that I should have and thought that I accepted years ago. And they're cropping up in my dreams all these years later. So it's very strange what's going on. I recognize that.
Yeah. Well, the people were having so many strange dreams during the pandemic that they actually have a website called I Dream of COVID. And you can actually go on there and see some of the themes, and you may find some of the ones you're dealing with. But I also think, and Gloria, you know this, and I think other people know this too, things from our past may be resolved in a sense that there may not be actively interfering with how we're living our lives. But under stress, or under less than ideal conditions, or in the absence of enough social support because of isolation, those issues can come right back up. Some of the things that are going on with the pandemic, the political scene, there are all kinds of things going on right now that could be very potent emotional triggers. And I think, I think also being stuck at home for as long as we were, having to sit with ourselves, a lot of people don't like to sit still with themselves because it's the stuff that might bubble up from the inside that's, what people try to avoid by staying busy. So with this much time alone, I'm not surprised that just in general, stuff is bubbling up inside of people, and it often manifests in dreams. It doesn't mean you haven't made a lot of progress with the issue. It's just often those are kind of core issues that, given the experiences we had growing up, mostly, they can get re-triggered. They can, but I think that's part of what's been so hard about it. And I think this yo-yo right now, that's why I was thinking this languishing topic is very important, because we're just thinking we can start to get out of this. We want to start getting out of it, and then all of a sudden it's like, whoa, pause for a little bit. So I know I was just on Cape Cod where they had a terrible outbreak in Provincetown. So, I went there one day and couldn't go back for the rest of the week because I didn't want to take any chances. But it was a reality check. I think we're all ready to be done with this. So this is not helping. Yeah. Anybody else want to share something? All right. Well, I think in the interest of time, unless Sandra, are you seeing any indications that anybody else wants to be heard?
I don't.
Okay. All right. Then I'm going to keep going. There's no perfect score on that test, but the national average is 65 now since the pandemic, and that was June of 2020. So I wouldn't be surprised if it's lower. But what I found helpful about it was that it kind of pointed to areas in my life that some were stronger and some were weaker. Like having a sense of purpose, that's something I feel strongly about. But there's definitely other areas that I need to sort of buff up or put some time into in order to kind of have a more balanced ability to thrive more fully. The antidote to languishing, at least proposed by Grant and many others that have written about this, is this concept of this potential, this very positive emotional state known as flow. Flow was made popular by, and I thank God I found a way to say his name. I think he's Russian or Eastern European, Mihai Csikszentmihalyi. So his first name is Mihai, his last name is Csikszentmihalyi. And he wrote quite a bit along with another researcher about this positive state of mind when you're completely absorbed in something. You're just fully engaged, you're totally focused on an activity to such a degree that time just flies and everything else sort of disappears. Athletes might refer to it as being in the zone. So flow is what we want to strive for. And flow is that experience of being so immersed in a meaningful activity that worries, time, the self just melt away. Now, he developed this concept from studying the creative process. He was watching artists at work, and he said, according to one author, Csikszentmihalyi became intrigued by their single-minded, unique focus and their persistence to continue with the painting in spite of any discomfort, tiredness, or hunger. So, he sort of was studying artists, and he noticed they could become intensely focused on creating a piece of artwork. He went on to study this in others as well, but that's in some ways the easiest way to think of it. There are two key components to flow. And the first is that it has to involve a challenge that's perceived to be at just the right amount of stretch for your skill sets. In other words, it's not too tough and it's not too easy. If it's too tough, you'll be discouraged. If it's too easy, you'll be bored. So you want this perfect balance sort of like it stretches you enough, but it doesn't stretch you so far that you can't really stick with it and do it. Then the second thing is it has to be kind of an unambiguous kind of short-term goal, something very concrete that you're moving toward, and that you get instant feedback on. So like an artist, they're painting and they see whether they like it or not, and they can kind of adjust based on that kind of feedback. So it's not about long-term goals. To be in the moment of flow, it's really kind of short-term goals, very clear what you're working toward, and you're getting feedback as you go. But flow can be experienced in almost any activity that has clearly defined goals and has that balance of difficulty to make it challenging, but not so hard that it's discouraging. So some examples of flow, and this is from an author named Houston, listening to or performing music. Sports, from mountain climbing to golf, that can put people in the zone. My sister's a big golfer, and they talk about being in the zone. Playing video games. I know some of you will be like, video games, but for young people, playing video games or any other kind of technologically based activities can be very absorbing and engaging. Work that can provide opportunities for that right balance of challenge and skill. I do experience flow. I notice when I'm working on these presentations, because I like kind of mastering a concept and then trying to figure out a way to translate it to people. And there is something called the Flourishing Genome, and you probably Google it and find it. It's a little questionnaire, and it'll tell you sort of what your personality type. Mine was that I liked sort of cognitive challenges. I liked things that made me use my brain. Other people, it might be something physical. So educational opportunities can create a sense of flow, especially if it's something you're genuinely interested in. And since most of us are past the point where we have to study for college, you really can choose to study things that are of interest to you. Hobbies are often a common experience for flow, from people from reading to doing crafts. And while we often think of achieving flow as a sort of solitary experience, research suggests that flow can be experienced and even enhanced when done in groups. Walker in 2010 created 3 situations to evaluate whether people experience flow more with others or with themselves. Firstly, it just did a survey of people, asking them, about their experiences of flow and finding out whether they did those on a more solitary basis or with other people. And then he created 2 different experiments where people got to experience flow either alone or in a social situation. In all 3 of those situations, the 2 experiments in the survey, he says people reported and expressed more joy performing with others than alone. So it's not something you have to do on your own. Csikszentmihalyi suggested achieving flow in the following ways. Focus on your body. This can be engaging in any kind of physical activity that appeals to you, such as dancing in your room or Tai Chi or golfing, or for me, jumping waves in the ocean. It can also be physical in the sense that you take some food that you really, really enjoy and you really take time to savor something that's really delicious. So you have to think about the physical activities that are appealing to you. So that focus on the body can be getting a massage, being touched, something that just puts you into a state where everything else kind of disappears. You can do it through your mind, through meditation, becoming engrossed in a book or a puzzle. You can do online brain exercises. I've given you some links to Lumosity and something called brain training. She sent me high, talked about leveraging your memory, recalling experiences where you reached a goal and the feeling you had when you reached that goal, that you can sort of experience a sense of flow, just even revisiting some of those experiences. Focusing on your thoughts, becoming sort of lost in your thoughts, daydreaming can in its own way be a sense of flow. Communication, he says, can be a source of flow. And Houston, writing about him, said, communication, whether through conversation or writing, is a natural way of engaging flow. By improving our understanding of the past, writing in particular, gives the mind a disciplined means of expression and self-feedback. So even writing about your own experiences in life or talking to others about it. When you sit down and have a really good conversation with somebody, you can have that sense that everything kind of disappeared and time stood still, and you're having a really good conversation with another human being. My experience is that, of course, those are the ones that are most authentic when you're letting yourself be human. Brene Brown, who writes about shame, says that the word courage comes from the Latin word cur, which is heart. And she says that, our most meaningful connections with other people are when we show ourselves, tell our story with our whole heart, meaning exposing the true story, warts and all, of our human experience. And that is in that level of vulnerability that we really find our most meaningful connections with other people. Engaging in lifelong learning, no matter what your age, you can always learn something new. You can learn something better. Those are things that are going to create a sense of flow. I'm going to give you some ideas about where you can do that. Just focusing on the job at hand, from actual work, if you're still working, to volunteer work. Achieving a goal that's important to you, that creates that sense of flow. It's really important when you're doing this to kind of limit distractions, which means turning off your cell phone, not letting other things distract you. So those are she send me highs areas of flow. I've come up with a few others that I found referenced. Just trying activities, places, experiences, and foods that are new to you or unfamiliar can create a sense of flow because you're more fully aware of something when it's new. I always say I need novel stimuli. I need to look at things I haven't seen a million times. I want to go someplace I haven't been before. I want to try something I haven't done before. And the reason that can create a sense of flow is because you're more fully attentive to it. You're not just kind of going through life on automatic pilot when you try something new and different. So just challenging yourself to do something a little, outside of the box or new and familiar is one really good way to get out of sort of automatic pilot and into more of a sense of flow or even just engagement with life. Because flow is, it's an ideal concept. It's nice to strive for, but it's also true that just doing anything that gets you more engaged in life, even if it's only for 15 minutes, is moving you out of the stagnation of languishing and toward thriving. So even if you just go out to a restaurant and have a really good meal somewhere you haven't eaten before, you're eating food you haven't tried before, just being fully present in the moment, just being fully engaged in something new, that's part of how you get out of this languishing. But you also have to give yourself quiet time and uninterrupted time. And Grant writes about this. He says, while finding new challenges, enjoyable experiences, and meaningful work are all possible remedies to languishing, it's hard to find flow when you can't focus. This was a problem long before the pandemic, when people were habitually checking emails 74 times a day and switching tasks every 10 minutes. Fragmented attention is an enemy of engagement and excellence. Protecting your time and carving out uninterrupted time is really key to flow. So he said we had problems with flow even before the pandemic when we were always multitasking. He says, just trying to give yourself the time to focus on one thing at a time is also an important part of finding flow. But it's also true that the pandemic has messed with people's sense of concentration. So you'll hear me say again at the end that important to find manageable chunks where you can be fully focused. And you may not be able to do that for long periods of time, but the more you do it, the more you'll expand your ability to do it. When I'm helping people who are grieving, one of the first things I say to them is, are you forgetting people's names? Are you forgetting dates? Are you finding you just can't concentrate? And they'll say, yes, how did you know that? Well, grief is one of those disruptive kind of emotions where, if your heart's tugging at you, if your psyche's tugging at you, the cognition it suffers. Everybody said part of this pandemic is grief, loss of normal, but it's also just a very disruptive experience. So it really has messed with our ability to concentrate. Somebody told me they were having problems with concentration, then I think the next 3 people told me something similar. So I typed in brain fog in the pandemic. Try it. You'll find at least 20 articles on brain fog in the pandemic. And I know it's partly because the psyche is tugging at us all the time, which disrupts cognition and ability to concentrate. So if you're having problems with concentrating, you are not alone. This is very common. And yet to get into flow, you have to be able to concentrate. So again, start with things that you like, or start with something new that will be automatically engaging because it's different. You're not on automatic pilot. Focusing on a project for 15 minutes, making it manageable, given your ability to concentrate, is also really key in terms of doing any of this. So other ways to create flow is basically learn something new or learn something better. And there's so many ways to do that. I listed the resources here in Delaware, like Encore, which is an adult 55 plus program that comes out of Dell Tech. I've given you a link to it. I've given you phone numbers because not everybody likes using the computer. They have all kinds of programs, from field trips to classes of just anything you can imagine. It's worth checking out. And I think membership is $20 or less, so it's really affordable. There's something called the Osher Lifelong Learning Center. I think they call it Ollie now. I don't know. But in any case, I gave you the names, the links and the phone numbers. I think actually I don't have a phone number. I think I just could find a link. But they do. I have classes on woodworking, art, music, history, everything you can imagine. And that's here in Lewis. I also put up here 21 sites that offer free online classes, especially for senior citizens. And in Delaware, if you're 60 and above, you can take classes for credit or just to audit them at the University of Delaware, Delaware State University, or even Delaware Technical and Community College, free. No tuition, don't have to pay the tuition. They often waive application fees, course registration, and other related fees. If you really want to go, you have to be registered for an official degree program, I think, to get the full tuition. But after the age of 60, you can even pursue a graduate degree through the University of Delaware and not have to pay any tuition. So just something to keep in mind. Might be too big a project right now, but again, look into Osher Lifelong Learning. I think they've been doing virtual classes. I don't know now whether we're going to go back, they'll go back to in person or not. So seek out those opportunities to learn something new, or to learn something you already know, but to learn to get better at it. Because those things that get you to learn, focus, especially if there are areas of interest, that will create flow and greater engagement with life. Take anything that you enjoy doing and just slow it down and savor it. Become fully immersed in the experience. That's really the key, is to become fully present in the experience. So take anything that you enjoy and just slow it down and savor it. Even if you just do something, that's a very simple way to start. Take a cup of tea, if this tea is what you really like to drink, and just focus on that moment of relaxation. So just let yourself be fully present. This is how you start to be more engaged in life. Cooking, baking, they're excellent ways to induce flow. Not for me, frankly, they scare the hell out of me, but for many people, cooking and baking are really good ways to induce flow. Because once again, you have to concentrate your focus, your intention on the moment. And you can allow yourself to be kind of lost in that moment. This is a quote: allow yourself to be lost in the zone and whip up some cupcakes. Call me if you do that. Bon Appetit offers 12 free online cooking classes you can take right now. I've got the link on your handout. 10 of the best online cooking classes you can start learning from right now. Also a link to that. Music is one of the easiest ways to get into flow, whether you're listening to it listening to it live or listening it to your home. I'm going to go hear Melissa Etheridge at the Freeman stage. I'll be in a pod with just my partner and my sister and her partner. They're sitting people far enough apart that it's still safe. So, go to a concert, go if you can and it's safe, or just put on music in your house and listen to it. Make a list of your favorite music. There's maybe some of you remember I did a talk about a program that was developed where they're putting on iPods music that they know would be familiar to somebody who has Alzheimer's or dementia. And they're finding, they show example of this man, he's lost in his dementia, he doesn't recognize his daughter, but they put headphones on him and they start playing music from his era. All of a sudden his face lights up and he's snapping his fingers and he's like, that's Cab Calloway. I listen to him all the time with my brother. He comes fully alive. we have so little to enliven people in nursing homes, for example. So this guy, a social worker, sort of created this program where he brings music into nursing homes on iPods, and people come fully alive, and they ask this man who is so out of it, but all of a sudden is listening to music, what do you like about the music? And he's like, you feel the love, when you're listening to music. So start getting your playlist ready, because even if you don't develop dementia, it's going to be good. It's going to be good for you to listen to. I found a group called the Rehoboth Boardwalk Jammers. If you just play music and you want to jam with other people, you can just sing in your shower. You can join a choir if you want to, but here are some of the opportunities. There's also something called Rise Up Singing in Rehoboth Beach. It's a free meetup that you could join. So music is a really easy way to tap into flow. Artistic expression, from crafts to mixed media to sculpting to painting. Do whatever appeals to you. I've taken some courses with two women that had a group called Shadi La, and it was a lot of crafting stuff, but they used a lot of collaging, because I can't draw to save my life, even though both of my parents were artists. Somehow they didn't pass that on to me. But my mother did say I get the gift of gab, so I'm grateful for that. Artistic expression. I've given you a list of court places where you can take art classes online, or many of the art leagues in this area, Milton, Mispillion, which is in Milford, Ocean City. They all offer art classes, and it can be from beginners to people that are more experienced. Get out to a museum. I think some of them are still open. I hope with you mass we can go. Philadelphia, Washington, D.C. have fantastic museums. I know I can become really engrossed in a museum. I went to the new one, the African American History and Culture, and it was an amazing museum in DC. But I've given you 2,500 museums you can visit virtually. There's a link you can go to the Louvre if you want to right now virtually. I also gave you another link called the 75 Best Virtual Museums Around the World. So you can go to a museum right from your computer these days. Writing, take a class online, do something locally. The Rehoboth Beach Writers Guild offers classes. There is something called the Creative Writing Center of Delaware. You can just also look online for writing prompts to get yourself started. Don't worry about whether you're going to write the next great American novel. Just see what comes out of you and see if you enjoy writing about it. The prompts are a great idea. They give you things that you just wouldn't have thought on your own. So I've got a number of web links for prompts. Photography, do it for pleasure, or make a gratitude collage. This is an idea of taking pictures of the things in your life for which you are grateful, and then sort of making a collage of them. All kinds of courses you can take in photography. Stretch yourself, but photography, woodworking, if it's something you enjoy, please indulge regularly. If you want to learn more about woodworking, there's tons of YouTube videos. But there's also a woodworking club in Rehoboth called the Lewis Rehoboth Woodworking Clubs. And they write, this is a free group, and it's open to anyone interested in woodworking, from beginner to experienced craftsman. And again, woodworking is offered under the Osher Lifelong Learning Center. Do-it-yourself projects. Have something you wanted to do for a long time, but just can't get yourself to do it. Search online for instructions. You can learn how to fold a fitted sheet. I've watched that video so many times, and I still can't fold the fitted sheet. But take something less easy and difficult. But there's tons of stuff you can watch online if you want to learn how to do something. Better yet, invite somebody over who either knows a little bit more than you do or is willing to learn with you. My sister and her partner do incredible projects. They transformed the room I'm in now from a screened-in porch into a four-season room, and our neighbor next door wanted to learn how to do some of this stuff, so she came over and helped. You could do those kind of things. Play with an animal or a child. Talk about something that will fully engage you. And if you don't have one and you can't borrow one, then volunteer with an organization. In fact, volunteering is a really good thing to do as a way to engage flow. Also, because volunteering improves your emotional health, your physical health. It can give you a focus. It can bring meaning and purpose to your life. There's tons of volunteer opportunities. Volunteer State Office of Volunteering in Delaware has a page you can go to. I gave you a link to 50 ways to volunteer in Delaware, and I gave you the United Way link. So there's lots of listings. You can type in where you live. You can type in the area of interest, that kind of stuff. Gardening, yard work. There are people that are just passionate about that. Scrapbooking, preserve family memories. Consider leaving your children or grandchildren a book in which you share family photos, and maybe you identify people that they probably wouldn't have known. We made my dad go through that and write on the back of pictures who everyone was, because we knew we wouldn't remember. You can make a book also for next generations that talk about your family history, but, also what was important to you in your life and what lessons do you want to leave for people. If you'd like a series of questions, because I've done a whole workshop on that, to guide you, send me an email and I'll be glad to give you a list of good questions. You know, people would say to me, oh, nobody's going to care about my life. But think about this. What would you give if your great-grandparents had left? Your grandparents or great-grandparents had left something that told about their life experiences and life lessons they felt they had learned, and books they hope you'll read, things like that. Needlework, give you some links to online sewing classes, get a massage, try flotation. I don't know if anybody's ever done it. It's wonderful. You float in a little tank, salt water holds you up. There's something called Urban Float in Rehoboth. It totally gives you a chance to check out of the world and just be in a zone. There's a link to Urban Float there. You can read more about it. Get outside and do things. You know, there's a Lewis Rehoboth 40 plus hiking, biking, kayaking social club that you can join. Spend time in nature. In fact, I give you a video here. I know we need to stop. How to induce a flow state in nature through a sense of awe. You know, we talked about awe a couple of months back. Want to find kindred spirit? Check out meetup groups. If you don't know about meetup groups, there is every kind of a meetup group you can imagine in your zip code. So you go to www.meetup.com, put in your zip code, see what kind of groups are available to you. That's how I found out about the woodworking group and the group that wants to get outside. In the end, only you can really identify what creates flow for you. But try new things, and just trying new things in order to discover what brings flow is an important part of the process. Know what activities bring flow for you. While there are indeed a number of, and I'm quoting now from Tate, while there are indeed a number of activities that more commonly lead to flow, challenging sports, combining mental and physical challenges, mentally complex activities like chess and writing, or absorbing activities like playing a musical instrument and reading, ultimately the activities will be personal to you. Activities that some people find mundane and boring will lead to flow for others, while some activities that lead to deep flow experiences for some will result in anxiety and fear for others. So it's really what appeals to you. Last thing I want to say, be realistic and start slow. And this is a final quote from Grant, who wrote the article that inspired this talk. The pandemic was a big loss. To transcend languishing, try starting with small wins, like the tiny triumph of figuring out a whodunit, or the rush of playing a 7-letter word game. One of the clearest paths to flow is a just manageable difficulty, a challenge that stretches your skills and heightens your resolve. That means carving out daily time to focus on a challenge that matters to you, an interesting project, a worthwhile goal, a meaningful conversation. Sometimes it's a small step toward rediscovering some of the energy and enthusiasm that you've missed during all these months. So I will stop there. And I know we've run over. If anybody has a pressing question, you can unmute yourself and share it. You can type into the but if not, you can write to me. If something occurs to you later, write to me. I'll give you an answer, or you want to share something, feel free to do that. And I know
also, for those who may not want to speak up or talk or whatever, or if you are having trouble with your microphone, you can put something in the chat and I'll ask the question for you if you want. There has been a guest who did respond about your questionnaire that they're not surprised that the able to give up happiness now for happiness later was lower, considering that they've had to do so much living in the moment, and that this person has been a teacher during the pandemic.
Oh, boy, that was hard.
So they felt that their role was more important than usual during the pandemic. And then
believe me, it was.
Yeah. Then they're also thanking you for the presentation.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
And so there's someone else who's asking the question, can you speak briefly about failure to thrive in older adults and how it is distinguished from languishing?
I don't know that I know enough about that to say something that I know is true. I think failure to thrive, I thought failure to thrive also had more to do with like not even eating enough and not sustaining your physical well-being. But you do have to wonder if some of that isn't you know, being created by mental languishing. Although I think when people are really not eating anymore and stuff, we're probably looking at more depression. But
Yeah, and from what I understand about failure to thrive, they mean it to be, I think, a little bit more in the physical way,
Yeah.
to rather than physically, that physically they're languishing.
Right.
And I know there's organic and inorganic, that someone may not be thriving physically, that is, related to just generally either not eating for whatever reason. But then there are folks who are maybe eating, but they're still not physically thriving.
Yeah.
So
What do you
they're
think?
probably connected. Yeah.
I was just going to say, I mean, when you think of food and eating, to me, it's a lot about whether you're engaging in life, whether you're really taking a bite out of life, whether you're still feeding yourself physically and at the soul level. So I think I can't help but wonder if they aren't intertwined in some way,
And someone put in the chat just information about Osher.
Okay.
That registration is open now for fall classes. Some
Yes.
are in person and some are virtual or online.
Okay.
And then also storyworthy.com is great to share family history. It's a great gift.
Fantastic idea. Yeah, that idea of creating a legacy for your children is very meaningful. They need to know your stories, and I think it's a great idea.
Right.
All right. Well, I guess we'll thank everybody for coming. And next Friday, we will repeat the presentation on chronic pain. If you know anybody that's interested in that topic, please be sure to encourage them to participate. And if you're not on the mailing list, write to either me or to Sandra.
Yeah. And if there's nothing else, I'm going to ask everyone to unmute and just say bye. And thanks to Dr. Judy, if you'd like.
Hi, thank you, Dr. Judy.
You're welcome. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Thank you, Dr. Judy. Thank you. It was
so
great.
We appreciate
good.
it.
Hey, Jane, good to see you.
Thanks.
Bye,
Thank you,
Kathy.
Dr. Judy.
Thank you.
Hey, Christina. That's my cousin. Bye, Dee Dee. Bye, Kathy.
Bye.
Love you guys. Bye, Gloria.
Love you back.
Dr. Judy, I feel like we're in romper room.
Yeah, grown-up romper room. We all need it. We all need romper room. That's never changed. Hey, Kathy. Bye, Dee Dee. Say goodbye to your dad. Bye, Dad.
Okay. Bye, Dad.
Love you guys. Love both of you. Bye,
Bye,
Dad.
everybody.
Good to see you there.
All right. Take care.
All right. See you next week.